position. Testing, testing. This is the microphone.
I hear the microphone.
All right, here we go. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Invicta live stream where we answer your questions and talk about history stuff that doesn't make it into the shows. 30 minutes in, this is becoming ancient history. Well, it's a good thing, isn't it? It's a good thing it's ancient history, because that's what we do here.
It means we can talk about it.
It means we can talk about it. We can talk about the stream.
Exactly. It's over 20 years old. We can talk about it. That's an Ask Historians joke.
Well, you know, it's actually interesting because isn't the origin of a lot of the research and work on this channel, didn't it kind of start with Julian coming to Ask Historians and asking for researchers?
Partly, yeah. Like originally, it's Julian loves history. I'm not sure you guys have noticed. Invicta really loves history. And he used the Rome Total War engine as a way to really push that. And he started talking about like the units of Total War and which units are the best and what are some good army comps. And then he started making videos of like, well, who are these units really? And it came to the point where he's like, oh wow, I need an expert to talk about these. So he'd reach out to people on Ask Historians. And those people would come in and, you know, help him with some research and some writing and such, and it evolved into the channel as you guys know it today.
Hold on, do we have some audio issues? Let me just turn the stream audio on for half a second.
Research and some writing and such, and it evolved into the channel as you...
Yeah, no, that sounds fine. Okay, never mind. Audio sounds fine.
We didn't screw up the beginning of the stream this time.
We didn't.
We didn't screw it up this time.
Something will explode later. You are very quiet, and there's somewhat of an echo. Let me just move the mic closer to my mouth. Perhaps that will assist. We can barely hear. Okay.
I think it's my mic that's a bit quiet. Are you able to turn me up?
Yep, I'm turning everybody up.
Sweet.
So I guess I should go through and do our introductions in case there's anybody new. I am Sophia. The little purple icon at the top, that's me. I am the resident Byzantinist, and I also head up the True Size project. We've got Chris, who is our Roman expert and who has done quite a few. The vast majority of the videos on this channel have been Chris's work. And then we have Dr. Christina Hotalen, who did Roman inflation and Roman empresses, right? And is an expert on the Severan dynasty.
I think so. Yep. Christina?
Yeah.
I got all your credentials correct?
Yes.
Awesome. In that case, let me grab a couple of audience questions from last time and get this ball rolling. So why did the Greeks of 600 BCE not accurately depict the heroic age in Greek mythology? So that's, on the one hand, an incredibly simple question. And actually, I do have a nice little reference for our discussion here. So I'm going to pull up. This painting is of Aeneas and Dido. It was done in the Renaissance period. And it depicts, you know, Aeneas, a Trojan, and Dido, a Carthaginian. And when you see this art, you'll notice that it looks nothing like what Aeneas or Dido would probably look like, but rather looks like, you know, a Renaissance interpretation of them. And this is
Sophie, sorry, not to interrupt you. Okay, I see the image now.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, there's...
I think a 30-second delay?
Yeah, there's a 15-second delay on what I say and what gets to the stream.
I'm sorry.
So just treat everything as if it's happening concurrently. Don't trust what the stream is saying.
Not currently, but in the future.
But one of the big things about art in general is that you need references. So these Greeks who were doing pottery art at the time were referencing things that they could actually see. So they would reference, you know, hoplites that they could actually see. They would reference shields that they could actually see. People that they could actually see. They would go and look at, you know, images of minotaurs and octopi and all kinds of other stuff, and they would look at that, and they would turn around and put it on their pot art.
And a lot of it's really good, and a lot of it I don't think we can put on YouTube because we're going to get demonetized if we do that.
Yeah.
But it's really good art, and it counts as ancient art, so does it count?
It's got genitals, so, you know, we got to be careful about that sort of thing. But
if
one of
there
the
are children in the chat, ask your parents about what those are.
But one of the things, well, this isn't marked for children. This is marked for adults. But
I'm still not going to show some of the fun octopus art. Anyway, go on.
But yeah, no, one of the big deals is the Trojan Age, the Mythic Age, the Archaic Age to the Greeks, that's a 600-year difference from 600 BCE to 1200 BCE, right? The Bronze Age collapse. And they had mostly an oral and pictorial history to rely upon. Like, writing wasn't very widespread, and if writing was being used, it was mostly being used to keep records. How many vats of olive oil do we have in the basement type thing. So we probably know more about the Greek Archaic Age now, 2,000 years later, over 2,000 years later, than they necessarily did then, at least when it comes to, like, specifics, due to archaeology and stuff. So the reason the Greeks represented it, they couldn't represent it accurately just because they didn't know, right? They knew what they could see, and they knew the stories that they'd been told. But it's not like it was all passed down to them. And, the Bronze Age collapse period, like Mycenaean Greece, southern Greece, the Dorian invasions, it was a period of massive upheaval. Like, one of the common historical theories is that while the Trojan War was going on, the Dorian invasion was happening in Greece, and the native Greek people were mostly pushed out of Thessaly and anywhere north of the Peloponnese. So, why didn't they? I mean, it was kind of post-apocalyptic, if you think about it. Like, there was a massive amount of damage that was done. So it shouldn't be surprising that they couldn't they couldn't give a faithful representation of what the Trojan War looked like.
One other interesting analogy, not to take away from that at all, but is to look at modern day anything. So if I say a swords and sandals flick, so my favorite example obviously is 300, because it's glorious.
I hate that movie.
I hate
that movie.
But like is that what hoplites were dressed in? So is that how hoplites were armored?
Ancient golden jockstraps.
Ancient golden jockstraps. We love it so much.
We don't.
So like that's one example of a modern depiction, but like let's go for a less outlandish example, and let's just pick, I don't know, any show set in the medieval times.
Well,
is that what an accurate army would look like?
You're just trying to make me mad. You're just trying to make me mad.
Exactly. So and then you look at that, and then you look at ancient pottery, and you're like, well, that's actually
could be worse.
It could be worse. It could be Zack Snyder designing that ancient pottery.
Do you guys like to drive parallels from ancient times with today's events? Do we like to? Yes. It's very fun to compare things to other things and draw parallels.
Okay,
are we going to do that on stream?
No.
No. Oh.
No. I hate doing it. I hate
doing that?
I hate doing it because the most common one that you see, at least I used to live in the U.S. For a significant amount of time. The most common one you see is, "Oh my God, America is the new Rome. Everything is the new Rome."
Now hold on.
Compare America to Rome.
Now hold on.
And it's completely inaccurate. There's
I wasn't saying anything like that. I was saying I personally enjoy tracking religious trends and artistic trends and economic trends and being like, here's, the reason this is happening today is because of what we did 200 years ago. And also they were suffering from a similar problem 200 years ago when they made that decision. I don't have anything specific in mind, but that's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to say America is the new Rome. America is an empire. We can make that comparison, but that's not...
Actually, tying this into something relevant. Look at me go.
Go ahead.
The Roman inflation episode, we got a lot of comments that were chattering about modern day inflation and how history repeats itself. It's a very, 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 very different system now than it was back then. And I'm not going to talk too much about now because A, I've got a 20-year rule. B, I am not a modern economist and I should not be giving money advice. But that being said, I can't talk about the Roman version because the Romans most commonly used a silver standard more than anything else. As we pointed out in that video, which was an excellent video. If you haven't watched it yet, you should watch it, but after the stream. Keep watching the stream. The silver standard, it worked really, 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 really well for a huge portion of, frankly, world history. and the only reason that the Romans had a couple issues here and there with it was that they wanted more dollars, and the easiest way to get more dollars is just to and take a little bit of silver out of $1 and turn it into another dollar. So that's it's a really, really, really interesting discussion to talk about. I had a blast making the Roman inflation video with Christina. Brilliant time working with her. Like we really rocked that. I'm quite proud of.
Who did most? Didn't Christina write that episode?
Yeah, Christina did the research and the initial writing. I did the editing, and we did the storyboarding together. And it was a frankly amazing project, and I am so far with her.
So
I mean, Chris certainly improved on a lot of what I had written and cleared up some gaps that I had just simply missed from writing and doing all the research on it. It was quite a bit. I mean, Chris and I managed a really good video.
So what
on a really complicated subject.
Is there really anything interesting in your? Because I've only seen the episode. I haven't even read the script. Is there anything really interesting that didn't make it in that you liked when you were researching it? Something that stood out? It's okay to say.
I mean, if there's one thing I wish I could have added was maybe a section on imperial coinage itself, than just the emperor's coinage as a section, but that's a whole other video for another day.
Okay, I am curious. What do you mean by imperial coinage itself? I don't know anything.
So there's imperial coinage versus provincial. Imperial coinage were the coins that were Rome approved, essentially. They had the imperial markings on them. The provincial mints are the mints that function out of the provinces, and those tend to be instead of Latin and Roman based.
They tend to be what?
They tend to be Greek.
Greek.
Yeah, those are Greek coins essentially. And the way provincial coins work versus imperial coins, if you look at the iconography of if you're comparing, it's really fascinating stuff what's happening. At least when I studied coins in the late 2nd and early 3rd century, at least, how the distribution of coins fluctuated between emperors and the sort of things that were being minted in coin, and the mints that were producing them. So things like that. I looked at the iconography.
Yeah, so wow. you were looking mostly at the images, the portraits of the emperor, and whatever was on the back, like peace or
obverse, reverse. I was looking at a lot of imperial family coinage and the empresses specifically.
And one fun spin-off of what Christina was saying, especially about the Eastern coinage, is how popular the imperial cult was, especially in the Eastern provinces, because. Yeah. These Eastern provinces had, for centuries earlier, their kings were known as the kings of kings. They had
Shah and Shah, yeah,
exactly,
mm-hmm.
And they were very much referred to as the God King. The best example going 300. It's Xerxes, the God.
Even
King.
The way provincial subjects would mint coins dedicated to the emperor family, and. I mean, which is something you see on inscriptions too, out of the provinces, just the titles and how far they go with appeasing.
Yes. Yeah, and how quickly they adopt that very religious worship the emperor subtext, which that's one video I kind of love to do maybe in the future sometime. It's one of those nice amorphous ideas for a video is was the Roman emperor actually a god? Was the Roman emperor divine? What makes a god a god? If someone has power over every aspect of your life, does that make that person or being divine?
I feel like that's ascribing way too much power to ancient monarchs, especially the ones that were mostly god kings, like the Persians themselves, that's a very decentralized system. I wouldn't say that the king had that much power over anyone's everyday life.
But if the king chose, if King Xerxes, say, chose to kill a farmer named Bob, who's working in the middle of nowhere in Assyria, say, could he do that?
Well, sure,
Absolutely.
but then
Absolutely he could.
Absolutely he could.
If
yes.
Xerxes chose that, if he decided he wanted to confiscate all that man's property, could he do that?
Yeah.
Absolutely he could. If he chose to give that man twice as much property as he had, could Xerxes do that? 100%.
Sure.
So what power does Xerxes not have over this person? And that you get into those really interesting questions, because someone at the level of an emperor can literally fertilize your fields by making a canal or an aqueduct that goes somewhere nearby that provides you with all the sustenance you need.
But that's more they can order. This is human organization.
Yes.
Absolutely. What's giving him this power is, an army, or, a collection of workers, or, taxes and a treasury that everyone pays. Like, this god that you're defining is created, as it were, by the taxpayer.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so fascinating, because these people, you truly believe in this. You give an offering to the emperor, maybe he'll notice you, and maybe he'll substantially change your life for the better. And that is the exact kind of thing people do with their religious cults, like you're offering to Dionysus, and so that you can have a happy party going on, next weekend, kind of thing. Or more realistically, an offering to Minerva for a safe childbirth. That offering, what's the difference between that offering to Minerva and an offering to the emperor because your fields are in drought and you need assistance from the royal treasury? What's the actual tangible difference? It's the same concept.
I was about to say, the tangible difference is that the local government might respond.
Or the imperial government might respond, which is the really interesting part. Anyway, that's my, fun soapbox, is what is the imperial cult you can really get into the weeds on it and have a lot of fun trying to decide, what makes a god, as it were. What makes an emperor a god and or not?
Well, an emperor and a god and a king, and generally any sort of monarch that's, embodying the state, right? It's the state itself that makes the emperor a god. It's all the shoulders that whatever this leader is standing on. Loyal men, loyal troops, on the one hand, when it comes to the sword arm. And then workers who, need to be paid, need to survive, human society on the other, that kind of builds up this godhood.
100%. Actually, so this is a slightly tangential, but very related. Do you know, I think it's the second most common statue from the Roman period?
I do not. I'm a Byzantinist.
So, that sounds like a very strange question. But the answer is actually Antinous.
Antinous is
the second most common statue of the Roman period.
Antinous is the most common.
Yes.
So please explain to the audience who Antinous is.
So, for those who might not remember, Antinous can best be described as Hadrian's twink boyfriend. He was a beautiful young lad, probably Syrian or somewhere in that Anatolia region. We don't 100% know. We know that apparently Hadrian was smitten at first sight, and as a result gave Antinous' hometown a boatload of money and all the imperial favor it could ever ask for. Antinous was with Hadrian all across his tours across the empire, which eventually led them into Egypt. And there are some fun, texts that survived from Egypt about them hunting lions together, yada, 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 yada.
What a weird dog.
Nile. Exactly. But then Antinous drowned under mysterious circumstances in the Nile, which drove Hadrian into an extreme depression. And Hadrian founded a city on the place where Antinous died. And when I say founded a city, I mean he relocated tens of thousands of people there gave it essentially infinite money, made it so that no one living in that city had to pay any taxes whatsoever, sent merchants through there specifically. He funded the creation of a crossroads, and the city was, of course, aptly named Antinopolis.
Antinopolis. Has that survived to the
yeah.
modern day? Hold on.
I don't believe it has.
Antinopolis.
It did quite well during the Byzantine period, but then I don't think it survived the Arab conquests.
Modern Shikabada was a city. Looks like it's still here.
Aha! I know the ruins are still hanging around.
Yeah, I'm checking to see if there's anything in the modern period. Nope, never mind. View of Antinopolis. It's just a blank field with rocks. It's gone.
Shame. Anyway, going off of that, he didn't just found a city. He founded a cult around Antinous, and Antinous was termed to be a god. He had ascended into godhood, and that became one of the most popular religions in the Roman Empire. It outcompeted Christianity for quite some time.
The worship of cute boys.
Well,
who can deny
yes.
them?
But Antinous was also, a god of youth, a god of good health, a god of vigor, a god of happiness and rebirth, because it was said that, he'd risen from the dead, from dying in the Nile, he had risen to become a god. So he was the same idea as, Jesus of Nazareth. He was a mortal being who had risen from the dead and become more. And so he became a god for all of those who wanted to overcome something. Extremely popular cult in Greece, extraordinarily popular in Egypt.
You mean to tell me that the Greeks liked to build statues of twinks? No.
Yes, the Greeks. Going all the way back to that favorite movie of mine, 300, the Greeks boy lovers? No, say it isn't so.
Couldn't be. Not my Greeks.
Yeah, no, so anyway, going all the way back, what makes someone into a god is people going along with it. I don't want to necessarily say it's just the bureaucratic state, because Hadrian, essentially, it was just like, my boyfriend's dead.
Big sad.
He's God now.
Press F, everyone, universally. Press F so that he can ascend to godhood.
Exactly. But yeah, no, anyone who held festivals to Antinous, I believe they were fully funded by the imperial government until Hadrian died. So people really liked Antinous.
Wow, we could throw so many parties, and on the emperor's dime.
Exactly. And it's all free. Look, we get feasts, we get parades, we get, people getting drunk all over the place, and it's free. There's no better party than that.
Wow. We should bring this back. I think the government should pay for me to put up statues of cute boys.
Exactly.
It's important, actually. It's part of my religious freedom.
So going all the way back to coinage, I find it fascinating. What makes a religion, and why do people worship? People?
Hadrian's lover is getting all these statues. Meanwhile, we don't know if the statue of Aurelian is him or Claudius Gothicus. What?
Yeah, no, what? Yeah, no, there are only a couple busts that survive of Aurelian, and it's debatable on who those busts are, because they don't have labels.
So we're just like, that's probably Aurelian, maybe?
That's correct.
Aurelian's the one who ended the 3rd century crisis, right? Or was that...
Well, he reunified, the lost territories of the Gallic and Palmyrene Empire. And then, he tried to bring about his own monetary reform to help the inflation, but, that didn't last very long, and he didn't last for very long in power.
Okay.
He tried really hard.
I was about to say, again, medievalist, right? Who's Aurelian? I'm trying not to sound too ignorant here.
Aurelian is the internet's favorite meme emperor. And one of the reasons for that is because the imagery is great. He's restitutor orbis. He's the guy who brought the world back together, reunifying the world. And I think there's a Total War mod that has him in a golden mask, kind of like Balthazar Gelt, with, big halo of golden spikes all around, and he's wearing this crown for. Actually, I think it's Rome Total War 2 concept art. Hold on.
Hold on, what? What are you talking about? I can't have dead air on my stream, Christopher.
I know I'm giving you dead air and it's cruel and unusual, but I'm actually just going to send you an image that you can go ahead and display on screen.
Oh boy, I can't wait to do stream surgery live in front of 100 people.
What could possibly go wrong?
Oh boy. Let's see, where did you send it?
In the voice chat.
Voice chat? Got it.
Toss in an image there.
Yes.
Where that is the honestly the image of Aurelian that has made it into the annals of memedom. Is that even a way to put it?
I mean, it's 2022, man.
It's 2022.
So anyway, while I'm doctoring the stream, tell me about Aurelian. Who was this guy? I know that, we gave him a very heroic description of a guy who just rose up through the ranks and saved the world. Was he actually? Or was he like a noble? Or was he really just some like legionary who made it all the way to the top?
Christina, did you want to take that one?
Can you take that?
Sure can. Yeah, Aurelian, he was a guy. He was, we don't really know much about his origins. He started out we do know that he, at least according to the lore that we have, he started out as a soldier who rose up through the ranks, due to his own popularity and gravitas. We don't know too much about where he started. We don't know much about his early life, etc. What we do know is that he won. And when, he finally ascended the ladder to Imperial Pretender, because the crisis of the 3rd century, Sophia, I'm not sure you're super familiar, so I'm going to give you like a 10-second breakdown, and by 10 seconds, I mean hopefully less than 5 minutes.
Much appreciated.
The crisis of the 3rd century was really defined by, as we showed in the inflation episode, coinage being debased and stolen left, right, and center, and being sent as tribute to everyone and their mothers to try to keep them out of Rome's borders, while Rome is having a century full of civil war.
And you got to have all the ransoms for those emperors that kept getting kidnapped.
Okay, so
kept getting kidnapped. Yeah.
They kept getting kidnapped?
Yeah.
Well, there was one emperor who got kidnapped. Larian, I think?
Yeah.
My memory. Yes.
And like a bunch of them either got kidnapped or captured post-battle, especially with the Sassanids. There's this great... Yeah,
that's who it was.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Who?
It was Gordian, one of the Gordians.
Gordian 1, 2, or 3?
Oh god, I forget which one.
We don't know. But there's this great engraving on a wall in Turkey, I think. Is it Turkey or is it farther east?
I believe it's further east.
Further east. Yeah, it might be in Iran. Of you know the exact one I'm talking about, Christina.
Yes.
Where you have the Persian emperor sitting on his throne, and you have the Roman emperor groveling at his feet, and it's iconic.
It's just a sign of like ultimate humiliation. Just like it was just this defeating, feeling for the Romans. Like
get wrecked.
And you see, it very much evokes like the triumphal arches and stuff that the Romans have in Rome. So like it's that kind of fun juxtaposition. Anyway, those emperors paid huge sums to ransom themselves, etc., etc., etc.
And then there was Philip with paying off the Persians, for tribute to end to end the war.
Convince them to stop attacking, and then on top of that, the Germanic tribes as well. So anyway, the crisis of the 3rd century sucked.
It's a period marked by military and political. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah, everything imploded.
Yeah.
Everything. Just everything just broke.
You know,
If you could think of
honestly,
stuff to break, it broke.
I've actually been, so, you know, we did What If Caesar, right? We've been playing with the idea of doing alternate histories. And I was looking at the 3rd century crisis stuff, and I was honestly thinking, you know, what if Aurelian lost when he went to fight Zenobia and the Palmyrene Empire, like, remained independent?
Yeah, no, Aurelian won.
Aurelian did win.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
He first went for the Gallic Empire, because the Gallic Empire was closer, and it was frankly essential that, like, if you can't go after Palmyra while Gaul is nipping at your heels.
Yeah, because
So-
Gaul's right there.
Yes, and that's interestingly enough, the formation of the Gallic Empire was mostly possible because of the British legions, because they were very intact compared to a lot of the legions in the rest of the empire. So the pretender who created the Gallic Empire. One of these days, we're gonna have to do a video on this because it's a really cool topic.
Galenius?
Yeah. I possibly. I'm not.
I
I'm not
don't
a specialist in
remember.
century. But yeah, so he took out the Gallic Empire first, and then immediately turned to fight Zenobia. In that war, Zenobia put up one heck of a fight. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say HE double hockey stick on stream, but the Palmyrene Empire eventually was defeated and reabsorbed into the Roman Empire. And then Aurelian started his war on the moneyers, where he basically raided all the imperial mints.
Really quickly, we do have a question that I would like to address in the chat, which is kind of out of the blue. But is there any tips to help somebody trying to create a classical antiquity fantasy world?
Oh, okay.
So this is some nerd shit. I mean, stuff.
I've got okay, so I've got a lot of ideas in that. My first one obviously is to read, but that's, basic. I'm a little bit biased here because my focus is very much in economic and social history. So my initial gut reaction is to say, yeah, learn the minutiae of
go get a PhD. Go get your degree.
Get a degree. No, but to learn the little things. So basically, so if I asked you what was the most valuable material in general, just not necessarily in money, but just in general.
The most valuable material, it's probably going to be bronze or iron. If we're not talking money.
Wood.
Wood. You know what? You're right.
Wood.
I was thinking metals.
1000% wood. Wood was by far the most valuable material, and it's not something you think about, right? Because you're like, oh yeah, no, it's gonna be, precious metals, it's gonna be iron, it's gonna be bronze, it's gonna be no, it's wood. You need wood to make iron and bronze. You need wood to burn for light. You need wood to cook with. You need wood for heating. You need wood for building. You need wood for making a navy. You need wood for making shields. You need. I can keep going and going and going.
Okay. I also have some suggestions on how to build a fantasy world. I know that this is kind of self-explanatory, but to build a convincing fantasy world, you honestly need to write a history for it. And the hard part of this is you need to give everyone equal time. You have like the central state or culture group that you really like, presumably, that you're building the fantasy world around. But you need to give everyone else time. You need to pick a couple of political ideologies that you want to represent within your world. You need to pick a couple of religions that you want to base in your world. So really, you need to it's politics and religion, and then boil that down to culture. Come up with one or two festivals. Decide who the traveling people are who go from like town to town. Decide what kingship means in your world. Are these god kings? Are these republican kings? Or, whatever. But you should really, to write a convincing and enjoyable world, you're ultimately going to have to... Now, I'm incredibly biased because I am a political and religious historian. But you really need to pick, like, three political ideologies, 3 different religions, and give them all equal time. And let them interact with each other. And that will give you something that like people can play with.
Yeah. So essentially, like, it's hard to say all of these things all at the same time, because if you have too big of a stack, you never get started on the first thing.
Yes.
If you have too big of a first step, you never get started. It's hard to say, any tips on building this? Because obviously my answers are very different than Sophia's standards. Christina, did you have any ideas of your own?
About
How to
what
build
exactly?
how to build a historically accurate fantasy, historically accurate, but a fantasy world based off of antiquity.
Oh dear. You're asking the wrong person. I do not read enough fantasy to
Totally
have
fine.
thought
Um,
on this. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, but it's again the hardest part is knowing where to start. And weirdly enough, my recommendation would be to start small, uh, figure out the story that you're trying to tell. Don't get so
Yes, that's.
consumed. Yeah,
I was
don't
going to
get
say the same
so
thing.
consumed in world building that you never get anything done. Figure
Yeah,
out the story you're trying to tell.
yeah. You need
Start.
a thesis statement first and foremost.
Yeah,
What is this
yeah,
world conveying? What is it
yeah,
talking about?
and it's not just about the world; it's about the story you're telling. So, like for example, if let's say I'm just telling the story about a butcher, a butcher who lives in Rome. Um, she's inherited the business from her father, who died after a tragic accident involving a bull, got gored by a bull or something. Okay, so his daughter becomes a butcher, and we actually have plenty of stuff to support this from the ancient world of some inscriptions of women holding relatively small jobs like this that are just normal jobs that they were in a position to take, and they did the jobs and apparently did them just fine. Um, so what would the conflicts this butcher have to deal with be? Well, possibly if it's a woman, she might have to deal with the inherent sexism of the Roman system. If it's if just in general for a butcher, she'd have to dealing with the farmers and their price haggling. She'd have to deal with the moneyers and not getting cheated. She'd have to deal with insurance and shipping and insurance fraud, which is going to be a fun topic in a future video that I can't tell you guys about quite yet. Um, but yeah, no. So think of the conflicts that your character might have to be presented with. If you're looking at again another example, prostitute in the ancient world, what's your prostitute going to have to deal with? What are the problems that your characters are going to have to deal with, and then how to solve them? And while you're answering these questions, you kind of build up a world around
Oh,
that.
speaking of prostitutes, we have
We do
another.
like that.
We love prostitutes here at
We do love them.
Invicta.com.
We do
Love them dearly. Pro sex worker. But anyway, we have another audience question that I have prepared here is, can we do an episode on medieval and classical camp followers?
Mm,
Oh,
that I want to say. Okay, so I want to say yes, but with lots of asterisks on that. So there's this thing called YouTube. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
I'm
Um,
familiar, actually.
okay, okay. It's a platform that we like to put content on. You might have, you might see it here, there, everywhere. Um, and this platform has very specific rules for things that we are and aren't allowed to show, and maybe some spicy content that we're not necessarily allowed to talk about. So I'm not necessarily probably supposed to say it, or else the algorithm will catch me and bonk me or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's hard to make these kinds of videos, and like Christina, you've actually written an episode that we're trying to figure out how to best present it so that YouTube doesn't
Get mad at
bonk
us.
reviews. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
Wait,
yeah,
what episode is that? Can we say?
we can absolutely say
What episode is that?
It's going to be contraception.
Oh, Roman contraception.
Yeah.
contraception and birth control.
Oh,
Right.
yeah. Can
Yeah.
that shouldn't be that controversial. It's just
Okay, so there's actually Christina, did you want to tell some mildly spicy anecdotes from things
yeah,
that
let's let Christina go for it.
Oh boy. Oh. Okay. So I guess I should go over. Should I talk about the method of dealing with
blooms? Yeah.
yeah, and how they would just shove all sorts of things up there.
Just shove it in there, you know.
Well,
Yeah, they would
it
put like
was,
really like they would put like really like repulsive like things that would emit putrid stenches and smells as a way to like draw it back downward. It's really weird.
Draw it being like a fetus? Like
no, the womb
No,
specifically.
the womb.
Oh, the womb
So-
specifically.
Because they believe that the womb would flutter up towards the woman's throat and sort of suffocate her. And one of the ways of drawing it back down towards, her abdomen where it needed to be was to put things like, like just rancid smells that would draw it back, where it needs to go.
Ah, yes,
Yeah,
the smell of the gut.
I think that was from Aristotle. It's from a Greek. Basically, the idea is if it smells terrible, it's going to repulse the womb, and if it smells really really nice, it's going to attract the womb. So you put the stinky stuff near the nose, and you put the sweet smelling stuff down south, and you try to balance the womb out. That's how you cure hysteria, by the way.
Oh god.
Yeah. And
Oh
just
my God.
imagine this being a diagnosable condition until fairly recently in the
I'm gonna go to the
like-
doctor and they just shove some some just rancid smelling herbs in my face.
Well, at that point, they would just give you antidepressants.
Hey, so
Just saying. I'm
Yeah.
just saying.
So that's one of those interesting episodes where, we tell that and it's really funny because you're like, oh wow, that must have been a very interesting gynecological appointment. But
It's
how?
just so absurd that you can't
Exactly.
believe that people did that. But yeah.
So the real question is, how do you depict that in art, though? And
Yeah.
how do you show that without without breaking YouTube's pretty strict content policies? Because YouTube. It's very very prim, very prudish. You can't show things like that. So,
They're
do
very
we
Victorian era.
Exactly. So do we go on the one hand? Do we go just with some icons and like a nice generic background, or do we show something with shadows? Like these. So going all the way back to your question on camp followers, I would love to do an episode on camp followers, and I'm pretty sure Christina would love to work on that as well. The hard part is figuring out how to do it and how to present it in such a way that we don't basically get shadow banned.
well, why don't we brainstorm live on air? Let everyone. So camp
You
followers.
camp follower.
So baseline, we're presumably we're doing Roman legionary camp followers. So this is going to be classical period.
So are you familiar with what camp followers are?
Like washerwomen, menders, prostitutes, families, wives, children. Like, these things have existed for most armies through most periods.
100%, 100,000%. Were they all women? So,
Were they all women? No.
exactly. And so you have this great radical, eclectic bundle of, frankly, a city that follows the army to do whatever the army wants or needs, or to fulfill the need, etc., etc., etc. I'm sure there's some economist who's made a law that there will always be people to fill a need that exists, something along those lines. But yeah, no, as you were saying, it's a lot of that was prostitutes, washerwomen, menders, and families. Like soldiers had families; they'd go with the soldiers because obviously.
Where else are you gonna go? Especially once the age of the citizen soldier has declined, and you have the career professional who doesn't necessarily have a farm that he's coming back to every season.
Bingo. So it would be an interesting episode, but how do you do it? That's the hard part, and that's one of the fun things about working on these documentaries behind the scenes, is it's not just the idea, it's how to make the idea come to life, and actually pulling this all the way back, relevance. That was actually one of the fun challenges we had with Roman inflation, because if you spend 30 minutes talking about ancient Roman economic and monetary policy to do with the percentage of metals in a specific coin, you're going to put people to sleep.
Yeah.
It's not. It's like,
I
if
fell
just
asleep
say
as
those
you
words-
said that. I was nodding off.
Exactly. I could hear your snoring. So
I don't snore.
That's what they all say. Um, so the the hard part is bringing those to life in a way that's engaging and actually informative at the same time, and most of all accurate. So engaging, accurate, and informative are all things that are just non-negotiable.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the way to really do that, especially through drier segments, is through art and through showing more than telling, or showing while you're telling.
Yes.
And that way you don't fall asleep, and that way it actually it registers and it clicks, and so that way when I'm saying, oh yeah, no, they're debasing the currency by 5%, we change the color so you can actually see what that debasement looks like, as the video goes on, which I've had a lot of fun doing that way.
Interesting. Sorry, I'm trying to. We've got another question in here to the medievalists. I've been holding on to this one the whole time because it's finally something relevant to me. To the medievalists, was Charlemagne the only medieval European king to have multiple wives? Watching House of the Dragon has made me think about that. Now, when you say multiple wives, I haven't seen House of the Dragon, and while I do know a good bit about Charlemagne, I don't know much about his marriages. Do you mean like multiple wives at the same time? Because that was a big no-no. That was not something you could get away with in medieval Europe. And honestly, divorce was also difficult. I think there are 2 legitimate grounds for divorce in medieval Europe, and that was consanguinity, which is incest, and I think cheating. I think you could get divorced, but only if the woman cheated. If the man cheated, it's fine.
That's messed up.
Yeah, it is. But again, don't quote me on that because that's not quite my deal. But yes, medieval rulers often came up with excuses to divorce their wives, especially if those wives were barren or did not produce sons or just weren't to their taste. So you can have multiple remarriages and multiple wives within the medieval period, yes. But can you have and also you could have concubines depending on how far south you go. For example, Robert Guiscard and the Sicilian Norman kings in southern Italy, they had harems. Straight up, there's a lot of Islamic influence there in Sicily and Palermo especially. And one of the things about the Sicilian silk industry, fun fact, so silk weaving was primarily done by women. And one of the things is if you want royal silk weaving, often the palace has its own silk weaving workshop, which was staffed exclusively by women. And it was an Islamic tradition that those women were also a harem, right? On the one hand, they did spinning, they did weaving. On the other, they were also the king's harem.
Oh man, so if you're cutting out at the worst possible times.
Oh wow, am I cutting out really badly?
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit.
Basically all the important words that you just said were cut out.
Oh, that's bad.
Yeah.
I know, it's so unfortunate.
Let me try one more time. Harems.
Yes.
You could be a Christian king with a harem if you were close enough to an Islamic region. So, the kings of Sicily had harems, and their harems were disguised as silk manufacturing workshops. Each palace had its own private silk manufacturing workshop, the cubiculum and the kuba, and these large areas that were staffed exclusively by women. And these women were skilled seamstresses, they were silk workers, and they were also a harem for the king. Concubines, essentially. But the further north you go, once you're north of the Pope, you can't get away with that. Once it gets a little frigid and chilly north of the Alps, none of that. We have monogamy all the way up there. Oh, really? No breakup at all? Well, that's great. I love it when there's no breakup at all. So, to answer your question, if you were a Sicilian king, you could have concubines, but you couldn't have wives. And if you were a northern king, you could also probably have concubines. Most kings have concubines, or mistresses, or something, but none of it could be official. No official wives. So I hope that kind of clears that up.
Yeah, no, that very much does for me, at least.
Yeah, no, the silk industry is fascinating. For example, did you know that Thebes was the central, like the city of Thebes, Thebes, in Greece, was the center of Byzantine silk manufacture, and it was run almost exclusively by Jewish women. And we know this
Really?
because all of those Jewish women were stolen by pirates and taken back to Sicily.
Whoa.
Yes, they were all like, they sacked Thebes, found all of the silk workers, and took them away. In order to bolster their own, because they already had silk production abilities at that time, but they just wanted more of them, I guess. But yeah, no, silk manufacturing is fascinating, and I would love to do an episode on it. But back
That would be a
to
lot of fun.
a couple of my pre-prepared questions. Um,
Please, Rambo.
I've got to keep it. I'm curious about the attrition in Roman legions.
Ooh, I think that one's a question for me.
That one is a question for you because
That was a question for me.
Chris does Roman legionnaires in retirement specifically.
Oh, I think that's one of many things.
One of many things. You did a lot of that though.
I did a lot of that. I did write an entire thing. I was gonna use the word that I'm not sure that I'm allowed to. I did a whole thing on that. Anyway, the Roman attrition rates in Roman legions are always they're always really tough to really say because it depends on obviously the time period, whether or not it was an active campaign, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are a whole bunch of different factors that play in. There are some estimates that near the end of his Gallic Wars, some of Julius Caesar's legions were at 50 to 60% of their on-paper manpower. Like they'd attrited a huge number of people. But
so did they die or did they leave?
Mostly died and or were injured to the point of not being able to continue as soldiers. Which, that's an extraordinarily large number. Now, of course, he still won his civil wars with those legions specifically, but that's because those men were veterans. And one veteran soldier's worth, 5 to 10.
Well, yeah, Pompey was raising
raw
functionally
troops.
militia to
Yeah, exactly.
resist.
Exactly. And anyone who's paying half attention to the war over in Ukraine can see the difference between conscripts and hardened soldiers. Hardened soldiers can fight way better than random conscripts. So you see Julius Caesar with these legions that are at half strength, and yet they are the strongest army in the known world at that point.
Well, I would also argue that they were the strongest army because most organized militaries were kind of already off of the playing field before the Romans took the scene.
Absolutely true. And obviously, I'm not looking at China at this point in time, mostly because China and Rome did not interact to any actual degree.
Yeah, the Mediterranean world is what we're talking about.
We're talking about the Mediterranean world specifically here. And on top of that, the British tribes and the German tribes were not a cohesive force.
Yeah, they were still clannish. They had a completely different culture around military service.
Yeah, which is why what I'm just emphasizing, like Caesar had the greatest cohesive army in the known world at this point. But this is just going all the way back to the question on attrition. This obviously was an extenuating circumstance. Most Roman armies did not spend this amount of time in such a grinding war in such a difficult place as Gaul. You see, like, for example, some of the Roman armies in the Greek wars, for example. Someone in chat mentioned stuff about Greece, and so, it's the first thing that came to mind. But these Roman armies in Greece, they barely suffered attritional rates to some degree here and there. Part of their problem was just, that their command structure was generally considered to be garbage and useless.
The Roman command structure?
Yeah, 100%. The Macedonian Wars are basically defined by Livy saying, all right, so this consul took a whole bunch of men and he went to Greece, and nothing happened because he was useless and he basically ate all of the funding that the Senate sent to him, and it disappeared mysteriously into, I don't know, yachts. But and then the Senate sends a new commander, and that commander takes his army and he whips them into shape, and you see some of these horrific punishments that are well known in the Roman armies. You don't usually see decimation, which was relatively rare, despite the modern pop culture fascination, frankly the ancient fascination with the practice as well. But you see these armies getting whipped into shape. And then after they get whipped into shape, they, march around the Greek peninsula, kicking Macedonian tail up and down. It's et cetera, et cetera. The attrition, again, on these armies is hard to say because our primary sources aren't super concerned with numbers. They're not usually concerned with accuracy on these numbers. So you see these crazy stories. Like there's this one great story from the Arabian campaign in AD 6, somewhere in there, under Augustus.
Where, we got to talk shit about Augustus later.
We will.
Don't
we
mind.
will. We will.
Let me remember.
We got to talk stuff about Augustus. We can't say that.
We got to talk stuff about Augustus.
We got to talk stuff about Augustus.
Yes.
So you see this great story about this guy who's going into the desert and his soldiers are starving and without water and everything sucks and they're doing a terrible job because they're trying to march heavily armed troops through a desert and no one's fighting them. And then when they eventually come up to an army, the heroic Romans are the best ever and they rout the opposing army and they only lose 2 men. And it's like, did they though? Is that really how that worked? Or did you maybe come across a farmer who shot a couple men with a bow before you killed him? I feel like that's a little more likely. Because there was no reason for these desert forces to fight. All you have to do to win a battle in a desert against an unprepared opponent is just...
not fight them. Just go into the desert and wait.
Exactly. Pull a Saladin at the...
Horns of Hotalen.
Hordes of Atene. There you go.
And actually, I'm seizing this. I'm seizing that one.
Yes.
Go. I am grasping at Saladin and the Third Crusade, because I've been doing some very interesting research on the Third Crusade. So as we all know, and all of you in chat should know this, my favorite movie in the world is Kingdom of Heaven, the director's cut, 3 hours long. You should watch it.
I was the one who got you to watch it for the first time.
Yes, Chris was the one who showed it to me. After the fall of Jerusalem, some of you who are probably more familiar with the Crusades might notice that Arabic forces, Saladin's forces, right? He takes Jerusalem, he takes Acre, he takes all of the coastal cities. But there are several Christian ports or Christian-occupied ports that remain on the coast, and do watch it. Don't listen to Defeat Hypocrisy. He's lying. Do watch the movie. Anyway, you might notice that several Christian ports remain unoccupied. Like, for example, Tripoli didn't fall. I don't think Antioch fell. Acre was quickly retaken. Like, a lot of Christian ports remained in Christian hands, which were necessary for, like, Richard the Lionheart and or Philip, or one of those French kings. They only have 2 names. One of those for them to land. But that's because there was a Sicilian admiral who was basically... Oh, what the heck is this?
We got spam! We got a spammer!
We got a spam bot.
Oh my goodness!
Ayo.
Spam bot, guys!
Ayo. That's how you know you hit the big leagues. Anyway, there was this guy called Margaritas. It's very difficult to write about Margaritas because every single autocorrect wants to turn it into margaritas. But he was a Sicilian admiral who essentially patrolled the entire coast of like Palestine, right, of Jerusalem, that area, and he would quickly duck into port with his 200 knights, run them up on the walls, and show the besieging Arabs that they still had sea access and that there were reinforcements. So just by showing up, he kind of stopped the complete conquest of the Levantine coast for like a year. Like, he was the only organized resistance after the fall of Jerusalem at all. And it took, like, I think 6 months for the Third Crusade to be called, at least. So there was he's a really cool guy, and I really want to do an episode about him.
it might be fun to do an episode about him. But it's also one of those things where it's like, you know what? I'm pulling this back to the top of the video, so.
Go ahead.
How was Kingdom of Heaven at depicting the true look of a Crusader army to scale?
Would you
in
say
the year of our Lord 2000? Was it?
Was it?
Come out 2000?
What did the Kingdom of Heaven accurately depict a Crusader army?
That's always a hard question.
That's a tough one because there are certain aspects of a Crusader army that aren't discussed. Like there's the what are they called? They're the like hairy, like rabid militiamen who just kind of like surrounded the armies, like these flagellants who just like don't really make it into the historical record, but we're pretty sure they existed. Those weren't shown. Yeah. I would say Kingdom of Heaven does an okay job. I would say, you know, as a big Hollywood movie goes, it would be difficult for us to represent the true size of a Crusader army accurately. But I think they did a good job.
Yeah, no, interestingly enough, my biggest issue with a lot of medieval movies is they have a huge fondness for showing everyone wearing plate armor.
Everyone wearing metal, yeah.
Everyone wearing metal, everyone wearing plate armor. And that was, in case chat is curious, very much not the case. The Romans were an anomaly in that most of their army was actually wearing mail. Most armies did not wear, like, you had to be rich to afford plate metal. Like, rich. And when I say rich, I mean owning a set of plate was like owning a Tesla a few years ago. You had to be rich to own this. And it was, you know, a flashy thing, of course, but 99% of people didn't have the money for that. You would be, you'd be wearing your chain. You'd be wearing, frankly, more than likely, you'd be wearing a padded jacket.
Yep.
You'd be wearing
a jerkin.
Bingo. The Greeks were famous for their linothorax, which modern recreation shows is actually pretty good armor as armor goes. It would stop arrows. It would stop, you know, it could turn aside a number of hits, but basically what it was cloth that was glued together to more cloth.
Yeah, give Gambus an armor its love. You're right.
Gambus armor worked. There's a reason people wore it is because it worked.
But it doesn't look very good. If you got a bunch of guys walking around in the equivalent of padded shirts, no one's going to be that excited on a screen, I suppose.
It's essentially wearing a winter jacket, and it doesn't look as good on screen as, you know, rows of shiny plate. But the biggest question, and like this is not a criticism of Lord of the Rings, which, for the record, legendary movie, completely legendary. But everyone's wearing plate. Where do they get all this plate armor? You have, you know, these how many orcs besieged Helm's Deep? Was it 10,000, 20,000?
Something. I think it was 10,000.
How do you know how much work it would take to make 20,000 sets of plate armor?
Actually, hold on. I think this is a great time to bring up the true size. So you're really emphasizing how much work it takes to equip 10,000 men, and you're right. So why don't we show the audience what 10,000 men would look like?
It looks like a lot of men, doesn't it?
It does. It looks like a whole lot of men. So I'm just going to let this loop on screen a little bit, and you'll see it here in a second. This is another trailer for the true size, which is something that we're coming out with. Something that we've kind of been obsessed with doing for a while, which is accurately representing an army. You know, what does it look like? How big is it? How much land does it take up? And this is also a project that I've been working on. Like, this is the thing that I've been doing the entire time. And isn't it just mind-boggling already how many people 80 men is? Like, just 80 people wearing plate alone already. That's an insane investment. That's several, like, man-hours. Also,
100%, yeah.
And Liquidback, also Hollywood doesn't show a lot of late medieval knights with their feathers. You're right. Hollywood are cowards. They won't show us the big stupid feather hats. It's
man.
so important that knights look dumb. They have to
As
look
dumb as
so
possible.
dumb. It's important. Human beings have loved stupid hats since the dawn of time. And
Yep.
we need to embrace that love.
You know what I'd love to see?
Hmm.
I'd love to see accurate Hollywood depiction of Landsknecht, the German mercenary two-handed, the guys who wielded these giant two-handed swords, but they dressed like something out of like the Empire from Total War Fantasy.
Nick, you're here! We were wondering if you were going to get here. Sorry. Go ahead.
I didn't actually see your
I didn't
question
see
there.
Nick in here.
I didn't
Nick,
see Nick
he
in here either.
just got here. Nick just got here.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Hi,
I
Nick.
I didn't mean to brush you off. I'm not allowed to. I can't like talk to you privately because this is a business thing. If you want to talk, we have to talk over like Discord. And for that you have to be a patron. And I can't unfortunately. I would love to sit down and talk to you.
Quick shout out to the Patreon, by the way.
Yeah, quick
If
shout out
you
to the
are
Patreon.
If you are a member of the Patreon, we love you.
Speaking of, if you're a patron member and you're listening to this podcast right now, talk to me. I send so much stuff in the general chat all the time, and you guys never answer, and it's very rude.
And just so you know, you guys can.
Christina, you cut off.
You cut out, Christina?
Oh, just saying, you guys can join the $1.
Oh yeah, you can join the Discord for $1. It's not that much. I wish they would add butt opening on the armor so the knights could poop. It is important, but that's not something that a lot of people
I
care
need a
about.
poop flask.
Well, what do you think the squires were there? Really?
You're so...
I'm not wrong. I'm not exaggerating, and I'm not lying. What do you think the squires were there for?
Will I love you for $3? No. I'm a little bit more expensive than that.
I would love you for $1, Mana. $1.
Chris, well, that shows you how much Chris's love is worth.
Look, my love is worth so much that I can give it away for just $1.
No, we miss Nick. We were missed.
Yeah, we missed you, Nick. We were wondering if you were going to be here. For those of you who don't know, Nick has been at our last couple of streams, and he always asks really good questions and is fun to talk to. That is to say, we do pay attention to the chat, and we remember who you guys are, especially if you talk a lot.
Especially if you talk fun things a lot. If you just type in all caps, well, I'll probably forget you tomorrow. But Nick is a cool person.
Hey, Nick. How's it going?
Be like Nick.
Be like Nick. Oh, yay. Yeah.
Be like Nick.
So, yeah, I wasn't ignoring you, man. I just can't really talk to you outside of the stream, in an unofficial capacity. I'm afraid. My apologies.
So join the Discord.
So join the Discord.
Yeah, no, we post stupid memes there. It's kind of great. Anyway, but the oh shoot, where were we? So,
I've got prepared questions here. We could take any of them. So, Augustus. I wanted to talk about Roman emperors and specifically Augustus. Chris, you were reciting some of Augustus's poetry for us earlier, weren't you?
I cannot recite that on stream. I cannot recite that on stream.
Could you recite a censored version of Augustus's poetry for us?
So do you just want me to play the little bleep sound for about 20 seconds?
That sounds good.
Excellent. Yeah, no, the essentially Augustus was writing dirty poetry about Mark Antony cheating on his wife. Mark Antony's wife is named Fulvia, so Fulvia wanted to cheat on Mark Antony with Octavian, but Octavian didn't want to sleep with Fulvia, and compared it to what would happen if, what would he say if a guy wanted to sleep with Octavian, and Octavian's like, I don't want that. And apparently she says it's either trying to find a fun thesaurus word. It's either the nuptial bed.
Oh, the marriage bed.
Yes. Well, it's not even the marriage bed. It's just the let's sleep together bed.
The
Or
boning bed. Can we
battle.
say boning?
Maybe, can we say? Ooh, I don't know. Did we just get demonetized? YouTube, please don't demonetize us.
Well, I
Wait,
don't
what
actually
happened?
have this flagged as monetized, so it
Oh,
shouldn't
okay.
be.
Oh, there we go. Anyway, so he's like, so it's either screwing or fighting. Well, uh, the translation I've got is nice and crude. It says, "My prick is dearer to me than my life. To battle then." And it's like, okay, Augustus, okay, okay.
My prick. Wow.
Can you just do
Oh,
like a
okay,
reading of
Augustus.
that poem, like on a video or something, just for kicks and giggles,
Just once. Just once I
Oh,
need
man.
everyone to know how
as a
bad
treat?
Augustus's poetry is.
It was pretty bad. It's what's funny is like no one talks about Augustus writing terrible poetry because everyone's like, Augustus is the first emperor. He's so great.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a terrible human. I mean, like as an administrator, he was pretty good. As a political operator, he was pretty good. As a human, he was actually terrible.
The Principate is honestly a very fascinating subject for me, mostly because I know nothing about it and the just the transfer from Republic to Empire, especially because it was very informal. Like there was no Darth Sidious didn't get up and declare the dissolution of the sentence and the creation of the First Galactic Empire. It was more that Augustus just kind of became the Mafia and just made
Yep.
himself in charge of everything.
Yeah.
Yep,
Right? That's how that happened.
essentially. One of my favorite anecdotes about that is that we actually have a series written on corruption in the Roman election, which we were going to put it up back in 2020, but the American election got a little bit too spicy for us to go ahead and put it up. So for now, it's on the back burner. It exists anyway. The corruption in the Roman election. One of the favorite things, little factoids I found while researching for that, is Augustus didn't really get rid of the corruption that was inherent in the system. He just became the biggest part of it. So he could outbid anyone for anything, and therefore no one else was bribing because Augustus was the biggest briber. So everyone just took their bribes from the biggest fish in the sea, and he basically muscled out all the little bribes. With
State organized crime.
state organized crime, 100%. Also, Salve Dom Cartoff. Cartoff. I have studied Latin extensively
I studied Greek.
and Greek. I studied Latin and Greek, and my Latin is significantly better than my Greek.
My Greek would be significantly better than my Latin if it was good. But it's been a long time since I've exercised those particular muscles.
Yeah, that one. No, your Greek was always better than your Latin, so. But that being said, Greek is a messy language.
I love Greek. I love Greek,
Greek
so
is a messy
much.
language.
It's you have no idea what anyone is saying. It is a language meant for very fast arguments, in my opinion.
And every vowel is an E. I'm not exaggerating. Every vowel in Greek is pronounced E.
I mean, ooh. There's ooh.
No, that's E.
That's definitely more of a modern Greek.
that is more of a modern Greek thing. It's a modern Greek thing. What's really fun is when you hear modern Greek speakers speaking ancient Greek, because then you can kind of see an echo of how these things were pronounced in the ancient world. And another, I know it's not 100% analogous to between modern and ancient Greek, but one of my favorite things that kind of shows it, and you can kind of see it if you squint, is actually lead clothing tags from the Romans, where people would, so for price tags, they'd use little lead slips, and so you'd carve, what the price was for X, Y, Z. So if you're selling, I don't know, a red tunic, you would write the color of the tunic, which was usually just Hema, with IIMA as Hema. So EEIIMA. And that's the color of hematite, which is basically blood red. All those all those different things you see about hematology, XYZ, that are all talking about blood, etc. That just comes from the color hematite, hema. So that was a very popular color of tunic in the Roman. So you'd see like XYZ number of yada yada. But those little bits of shorthand kind of illustrate the pronunciation of vowels, which is one of those. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a very interesting tangent. It's something that I find interesting that everyone else is like, okay, Chris, please stop talking about clothing prices and pronunciations that you found in some random lead tags that were found in, I don't know.
I don't know. If we want to look at vowel pronunciation, I think poetic meter is a far more interesting way to go.
Poetic meter is a very interesting one, isn't it? Because you can take a lot from it, but you can also ignore it if you want.
It's true. I mean, you can't, like, how much are we stretching this vowel to fit this meter?
Yeah,
and
that
so
one.
on.
That one. How bad of a poet are we, where we are just like, okay, so we're gonna pretend this thing is long just because it fits.
Oh, please keep talking, Chris. Love your content. Ooh, the audience loves you, Christopher. This isn't gonna go to your head.
No, they love me talking about lead tags. Oh, this is a problem.
Where we can use this as ammunition to push the lead tags episode.
No, that would be just me talking about Roman economic things. I mean, again, if you want to get me ranting, just say, like, the Greeks couldn't see the color blue. I have complained so many times about this one.
The vast majority, I believe, of historians are, like, mad about the wine dark sea comments, I think.
God, it's wine dark. Homer's a poet, guys. Homer's a poet. He's not being literal. It fits the meter. Like we were saying, it fits the meter.
Hey, did the Romans use drugs? Yes.
Oh, man. Healing and war. Yes. The answer is yes. If you want to look up, if you want to have a great time, and possibly some interesting things on your search history, look up psychedelic honey.
Oh, now there's a good one. I remember translating Xenophon's account of psychedelic honey.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those really interesting accounts, isn't it?
Yeah, because, I mean, they didn't know what was happening, right? They just,
right? Yeah.
they get to these northern mountains, and they're all starving to death, and they've been marching for months and months and months through this harsh winter. And they get to this village, and the villagers, I think, offered them honey? I don't remember if they looted it. But they obtained some honey. And Xenophon's like, yeah, guys just started, like, stumbling around and screaming, and we really had no idea what was going on. Like, imagine if you encounter psychedelics not knowing what a psychedelic even, like, having no basis. No beginning for what is happening in your head right now. Other than...
Whatsoever, yeah.
I want psychedelic honey. I want it so bad. I feel like that would be an amazing trip.
Yeah, and the entire theory behind it is that it's the bees feeding on the pollen of rhododendron flowers, right?
I think so.
Yeah, and so it creates this weird psychedelic effect where you just like see things, and you're like, oh god.
Oh god, I'm seeing things.
Oh god, I'm seeing things. And just imagine now that you have 10,000 heavily armed mercenary hoplites
with PTSD and like serious
PTSD,
trauma,
who are all just seeing things.
Like, you're some poor villager like, hey, you guys want some honey? You know what I'm saying? And then they just start tripping. Bad time.
And that's one of those things. It just sounds like it would be. I would love to be a fly on the wall to see an entire army of mercenary hoplites just disintegrate because they're all tripping on honey.
I think it was a few men. I don't think the whole army got honey.
No, it was definitely a small portion. It was definitely not the entire army, or Xenophon would have had some very interesting stories talking about, Xerxes being 10 foot tall in a golden thong and, dripping with golden piercing.
In the year 400 BC, I do some honey and just see the entire 300 movie. Like, come back around like, what was that? What did I just witness? There was an ogre.
An ogre with knife hands.
Ogre with knife hands. Have we played Assassin's Creed before? If so, what are your favorites in terms of historical accuracy?
Christina.
Oh, Christina, did you play Assassin's Creed?
I love Assassin's Creed.
Go ahead.
I'm obsessed with Assassin's Creed. Now I play them for more fun than I'm looking for historical accuracy, if I'm being honest, because
Me
when I
too.
play video games, I want to relax and be entertained. But I will say, I don't know which game is honestly the best for historical accuracy. I will say though, I really appreciate their discovery modes that they've added to their newer games. And I really like what they've done as far as recreating life in these various games. I like I like what they did with Odyssey in particular. Now I have some disagreements about the way those temples look, especially. I mean, Sparta looks like Gangster's Paradise in that game.
Gangsters?
And
I'm gonna need you to elaborate. I haven't played Assassin's Creed Odyssey. What does gangsters?
so,
What does this
I
mean?
mean, because okay,
Odyssey's a
the real
beautiful
Sparta is really barren. I mean, when you go visit real Sparta, there's nothing there. You know, there's a monument to the Spartans, whatever, but that's it. It's not Disneyland or anything. But in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, they made Sparta look like Malibu. They made it look really nice. I mean, it's a beautiful game. I mean, they certainly took creative liberties in some things, especially with, like the inside of the temples. Like they have the repeating Minoan frescoes in all the temples, even on the mainland. You know, I'm sorry, Chris was saying stuff, and I kept cutting him off.
Oh
No,
no,
keep
totally
going.
Fine, totally fine. Keep going. I'm just inserting myself. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I was thinking about other things too. I did LOL hysterically when they introduced Herodotus being like the most trusted historian in antiquity.
Wait, what?
Yeah, they made some pretty bold claims about Herodotus being like I don't remember where they said it exactly. I just the very first time I played the game and I was like, WTF.
When does Assassin's Creed Odyssey take place?
Classical Greece, like Periclean Athens, like Plague of Athens and all that. That's when I forget what the years are.
Isn't that the first half of the Peloponnesian War?
It is.
It is, yes.
Before the 40-year peace, and then the second half of the Peloponnesian War.
Before the dark times, before the fall of Athens. Was it really a dark time?
Yeah, I was about to say, is Athens? I mean, Sparta winning bad, but Athens losing good. So you know,
You know who the real winner of the Peloponnesian War was?
Thebes.
Persia. Because it got the pirates to kill each other and to stop raiding Persian territory.
I will say, because you mentioned Persia, I will say kudos to the team who designed the game, because at least they made Xerxes look respectable. They didn't do it dirty like 300. And you do actually get to play against the Persians, and you get to fight them. I mean, they took a lot of liberties with historical characters and like reimagining them in this fictionalized context of the game. But it's fun. I mean, can't go wrong. They did a really good job with a lot of things, but if you're playing it for historical accuracy, go play Discovery. Like, don't play the actual game campaign.
Honestly, I stopped playing Assassin's Creed after Black Flag. My favorites were, I loved Ezio. Like,
it's pretty good. I really liked Origins quite a bit myself. I know Origins got mixed reviews-ish.
I love Origins.
I absolutely love Origins. Origins is set essentially Caesar and Cleopatra.
Yeah, this is that's like
there.
Hellenistic Egypt, right?
Yeah, it's very Hellenistic. It's beautifully done. You get to hear, one of my favorite parts was going to Alexandria for the first time, and when you're in the Egyptian region, you hear all these people speaking Egyptian, and then when you're in the Jewish district, they're speaking Yiddish, I think?
Like a Semitic language, surely. Aramaic, probably.
Yeah, Aramaic, possibly. And then when you go to the Greek section, they're all speaking Greek. So you have this very metropolitan, which was what Alexandria was. Like, each district was very, very, very homogenous depending on the people who are there.
Alexandria is like this metropolitan Greek city.
It's gorgeous. Yeah.
I mean, they did a beautiful job with it.
The library of Alexandria and the lighthouse. Oh, that lighthouse was fun to climb. Sorry, I get excited.
So I'm gonna bring us back to history for a second here, gang. Which is in theory the reason people are listening to us right now.
Right. Sorry, guys.
That's great compared to history.
So here's another Christina-oriented question, mostly because Christina is the one who answered it. But on one of our videos, specifically the Empresses of Rome, someone asked, "What does CE stand for?"
Okay.
So figure we would just run that one out there. I imagine most people in the chat do know what CE stands for, but we figure might as well just lay it out. So Christina.
Yeah. I mean, CE. BCE, CE. It's just another form of dating, like BC and AD. It means the same exact thing, but the BCE and CE dating was introduced as early as the 17th century because the intellects back then, the scholars of that era, they introduced it because it was more secularized for Jewish scholars and intellectuals at the time. Because, before Christ, Anno Domini, after death, after, the year of our Lord, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was, for them, they argued that BCE and CE dating was accurate because we don't actually know when Jesus was born exactly. For them, they argue that it wasn't as accurate as, say, the Common Era and before Common Era, the abbreviation. Did that make sense? I'm sorry if it didn't.
It totally made sense.
Okay.
So Boone asks, did the Persians and Egyptians resent their Greek overlords? Yes. Yes, they did.
So much. Oh, so much. Which was wild is the amount. I think part of you don't get to really see it too much. That being said, caveat. I am not a Ptolemaic scholar, but one of the very, very interesting ways you can see it is how much the Egyptians loved Cleopatra because she spoke their language. She was the first Egyptian queen. She's the first Ptolemaic ruler to speak Egyptian.
I think it's Coptic.
Yes.
Didn't she know 7 languages?
Yeah, she knew 7 languages. She was a genius. She was bloody brilliant. And but no, Hollywood just means that she has big titties. No, Cleopatra she was a brilliant ruler who was just in a really terrible situation.
She was in a terrible spot.
Yeah, she was in a terrible spot, and she made an amazing job of it. And her one mistake was just betting on the wrong horse because Antony was less competent than Augustus. That was her only mistake, which, again, from her perspective, Antony was a way safer and better bet than an 18-year-old who was writing bad, dirty poetry about his mother-in-law.
Oh my God, Augustus is
Augustus
is a SoundCloud rapper. Oh no. I can't get this out of my head now.
Oh
no.
Divine Caesar.
How bad of a bet Augustus was.
He's a sickly SoundCloud rapper who was riding on his dad's coattails.
It's true. And that going all the way back to that is you see that resentment towards the Greek overlords when they finally have a ruler who speaks their language. They are so happy. The people are so happy.
And also I would like to note, because when I was studying the Seleucids, the Greeks didn't really like to mingle with the local populations.
They did not, sorry.
They would establish, Greek colonies. You would have, retirement colonies for Greek phalangites, or you would have colonies established or taken over by primarily, Hellenic peoples, throughout the area. And one of the reasons that, the Bactrians rose up in revolt and the Parthians rose up in revolt was because the Seleucids were just kind of overlords. In the sense that they remained culturally distant. They remained distinctly different. They had different gods. They had a different language. They did use military police in the areas that they settled, to like keep things in order. And their only interaction with their like native subjects was pretty much taxation, which is not a lot of that doesn't really build goodwill. They did Hellenize. People did the the period of Hellenization. It's very real. It did exist. There were large Greek-speaking populations in the Middle East for quite a long time, but they were always like, I don't know if I want to say that. I don't know if I want to say they were transplants, because after a point they did become native. That's a difficult one. I would honestly have to research more.
It's one of those very difficult questions when you get into the nitty-gritty of it, especially because you have to understand that most of the population was not urbanized. Most of the population was not in these major
rural.
They were they were very rural. So like you can talk about the 10% of people who are in cities. Great. We can talk about the riots of Alexandria. Fantastic topic, by the way. But you never hear about these small cities in Anatolia. You never hear about those small villages out in the middle of nowhere and how they lived, what they did, what they thought about things. Frankly, between you and me, they probably didn't care all that much because their life didn't change all that much. To illustrate that, I can support this with a source. There's an inscription in I think it's southwestern Anatolia ? Don't quote me on that. It's somewhere around there. Where in oh god, dates are hard. I don't like dating, guys. Dating is hard.
Dating is hard.
Dating is so hard. So okay, gonna not bother with the numbers of the date. One year they had an inscription talking about Antiochus the Great. I think Antiochus the Third, who was the ruler of the Seleucid Empire. And it was a big thank you to Antiochus for being the bestest, the greatest, and it reaffirmed loyalty to Antiochus for all time, forever, forever, forever.
Cool.
On the other side, it's like a doorway, an arch. On the immediate other side of the doorway, facing that inscription, was written another inscription 3 years later, praising the Roman Senate for their patronage, talking about how great the Roman Senate is, and swearing loyalty to the Roman Senate forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever.
So this was during the Roman Seleucid Wars.
Yes, and it is 3 years apart.
Wow, we love you.
One of my favorite things.
Wow, we love you. I mean, don't look at that inscription. Look at this inscription. We love you more.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, that one. Exactly. So it's one of those things where how much did life really change for the majority of people? Not much. You still paid taxes, and you still had a central government that you could appeal to.
I know one of the reasons that conquest was so, I guess it was simpler in the ancient world, precisely because there wasn't a strong nationalistic feeling, but also a conqueror could come up to a town and say, look, if you submit, I won't tax you as heavily as the guys who currently rule you. And they'd be like, really? Exactly. You lower our taxes? And then they would open the gates. Go on? That's actually one of the reasons the Byzantine Empire fell apart so much, was because they taxed their borders extremely heavily. And because they taxed their borders so heavily, the border towns were much more likely to just flip to the first conquering army that showed up.
Yep. Because
everyone would be like, we won't tax you as harsh as they do. And they'd be like, really? You don't say.
Yep. It's one of those things where loyalty is always squishy. You have all these people who are like, oh my god, how could the Byzantines lose to those, to the Saracens or whatever empire they were fighting at the time? How could they lose? And it's like, well, the other guys offered a better deal.
The Byzantines kind of suck. As the Byzantinist, as a person who has spent 11 years studying Byzantium, I can say with perfect truthfulness, the Byzantines suck, and their empire fell apart because they sucked. And to illustrate my point, I think I've talked about this on a previous stream, but I think it's very, very important. One of the Byzantine military policies was to tax border regions 3 times as hard as all of their other regions. And that was to prevent wealth from accumulating in their border towns, which was a measure to deter raiders, essentially. Like, no one will come in and raid if we tax them extremely hard. And all that did was make all of the Byzantine border provinces extremely likely to revolt and leave. Or to just, like bow to the next person to show up.
Especially because, I don't know, they offer a better deal.
They offer a better deal. That's why the Byzantines. That's why Syria, Egypt, and why did Heraclius made this monumental effort to recapture the Byzantine East, and then the wave of Islamic expansion happens like 20 years later, not even, and the East just folds, and it's because the Easterners were being heavily taxed. They didn't like being taxed. Also, the Heraclius was the wrong kind of Christian. I think he was a monophysite or something. Either the East was monophysite and Heraclius wasn't, or Heraclius was a monophysite and the East wasn't. But he was the wrong kind of Christian. So they saw the Muslims as like a better kind of Christian, a more preferable Christianity than the Christianity that was in Constantinople at the time. Yeah. Which is why it's so disunited. Like, they were so fractured.
Well, what's really fascinating that this underscores a lot is communication networks and those kinds of things in the ancient world. And I mean, religion factors in heavily with that, especially with how in the Roman Empire you have all these people who are being convinced to worship Christianity because they basically treated, the Christian god as, oh, it's just another god in the pantheon. Okay, so he's got all, what powers does this god? Oh, he's got all the powers. Oh, okay, so he's kind of like Hercules? Question mark. They're trying to associate it within their own world.
Yeah, within their own sphere.
So you see, like, going back to your example, these tiny villages on the borders of the Byzantine Empire, they're like, okay, so we've got all our churches and stuff, and this ambassador comes in from the Islamic Empire next door, and he's like, well, we got religions, basically the same thing.
I should point out, Chris, before you dig this hole too deep for yourself.
Before I dig it, I will dig it.
Paganism was almost completely gone by the time like Islam came onto the scene.
No, 100%. But like what I'm hearing, and I may be completely off base with this, is you have these people who they've got their nice church and blah 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 blah, and that's basically the building in their town. And then this ambassador comes in, he's like, oh yeah, no, Islam, no, we do mosques. It's basically the same as your church, but also you have to pay less taxes. And they're like, okay,
bingo. Deal. We'll take it.
What's up? Yeah, sure.
We've been trying to revolt against Constantinople for years anyway. So you new guys are definitely better than them.
Yeah. So do you still build roads? Yes. Oh,
well, it's actually very interesting because the Arabic administration, when the first caliphs, right, when like Umar and stuff, when they took over the East, they didn't know how to run an empire at all. And it's very obvious that they just took all of the Byzantine tax structures that were there, all of the Byzantine all of the Byzantine bureaucracy that was already there. They just took that and ran with it. They were like, well, it seems to be working, so we're just gonna use this while we figure out how we actually want to run things, because they didn't know. They weren't imperial up until that point. But, question for Christina. Man. In your studies, did you cover the women in later Roman history before specializing in the early Principate?
I was actually about to respond to the chat, but I studied a little bit of those Republican women. But if anything, when I first started my master's degree, I actually was studying a little bit of Byzantine imperial women, mostly Theodosian women for a little bit. And then I switched back over to the 3rd century.
Theodosian women. This is something that I'm not familiar with. Who are they?
Yeah. I wish I remembered more now, but yeah, the Theodosian women are just really like incredible women of the early Byzantine period. Like they're really big movers and shakers. Like Pulcheria, as far as I remember, like played such a strong hand in both the church and the state, which was really quite, audacious for a woman at that point, especially with the church, because she was ruthlessly like attacked by John Chrysostom, and I forget who else, but yeah, just really interesting women and really influential as far as how they were able to like do things, in the early medieval period. So that's really as far as I got with it.
5th and 6th. Oh, wow, that's something I completely missed. I guess I was always more focused on the military aspects of that particular time period, and I was probably studying Zeno at the time, who is a fascinating character. Zeno the Isaurian, who like watched the West fall and went, well, guess it fell. That's a shame.
Yeah, no. I was interested in like I was obviously interested in gender and like the politics, but I also was interested in like the plague of Justinian for a little bit. I did a big paper on that in grad school.
Oh, really? What about?
Yeah, I mean that was. Huh?
What was like your thesis in the paper? Like, what were you arguing?
Oh God, I don't even remember now. It was like I just remember enjoying it.
Christina, we're losing viewers. The numbers are going down. You've got to be interesting.
Listen, I'm sorry. It was a long time ago, but I mean, I can tell you this stuff is really interesting. Lots of dead people, right?
Lots of people died.
That is exciting.
I've got to say, one of the saddest, like, whenever I'm studying history and I see the words like, and then the economy took a big hit. And it's like, oh, you mean because people died? Because so many people died. It's like, oh, the economy. No. People are dying. But, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's really fascinating. It's just like, well, the relationship between the economy and dead people.
Oh, well, if there's less people, you see, there is less economy.
Okay, but, Soph, I've got to be pedantic here. If there are fewer people.
If there are fewer people, there's fewer economy. Very well.
I'm such a... can't say those words. They're naughty words.
Can't say the naughty words on the YouTube.
Can't say the naughty words.
Banned.
There was actually a question in chat, Decent Ways Up, that was asking about the ancient world and race. I don't want to address that on live stream, simply because we did an entire episode on that about a year ago. If you want to go watch that episode on what did the ancient Romans think of race, go check it out. It's a really good episode. Put a whole shit ton of work. A lot of work into it. And yeah, no, go check it out. It's a great episode.
Thoughts on the latest news discovering the rediscovery of Sylphion? Hell yeah, man! It's back!
Christina, what'd you think of that?
The plant.
I thought that was awesome.
Plant back.
I just love it. I love that it's in Turkey, in the middle of this field.
Oh, by the way, the plant's fine.
I think it's fascinating. What were you saying?
I was just gonna say, plant's been fine this whole time. Actually, we were all freaking out over nothing. Sylphion never went away.
Honestly, I really want to try it because it's
I want to try it.
Good.
I want to try it so bad.
I know, like it's.
I want to eat it to extinction again.
It's apparently like it's a spice. Yeah, like it's mostly used on food, and I was actually reading up on it a little bit earlier. Plenty talks about how it is feeding cows with Sylphion is one of the best ways to get delicious cows / beef.
Like it flavors the beef?
Yeah, it makes them delicious. Apparently, it acts as an emetic. So basically, it makes them squirt from both ends, and then they lose weight and they're going to be a little bit underweight for about 40 days, but after that, they're going to be the best cows you've ever raised.
We're gonna make this cow so miserable by feeding it something that doesn't agree with it at all, and then
Exactly.
then we're going to kill it.
Apparently, it works great for sheep as well. So, yeah, no, it's one of those really interesting random. That being said, Pliny says a lot of things.
Pliny does say a lot of things.
I don't know if they're entirely true.
Well, the only solution then is to find a cow and feed it Sylphion and see what happens. And then kill that cow and eat that cow.
Well, apparently, like, it was very popular just for all the farmers in the region. The farmers in the region knew what the Sylphion was because they just used it to feed their cows because it was a weed.
Sylphion.
It was basically, yeah, it was basically a variety of fennel. So, like, they're like, oh yeah, no, this is great for grazing the cows. So we just graze the cows over in these fields.
So, Modern World is saying Sylphion has a lot of potential for weight control, birth control, cancer treatment, and more. I don't know about all that.
I don't know about the birth control. That's the one thing that keeps being with the mention of that's actually that was perpetuated by a scholar who just didn't understand the science of the plant. And unfortunately, that has carried on in the field since. And I mean, Sylphium was used for a lot of gastrointestinal issues more than it was more effective for that than we just cannot confirm that.
Yep. And I think there's a recipe in the Hippocratic Corpus that recommends like a pea-sized amount of Sylphion and a few other things, and it helps with pneumonia.
You're gonna what my corpus?
Yeah, no, I've actually, like, I looked into it because I was reading that article about the rediscovery of Sylphion, and yeah, there really aren't many ancient references to using Sylphium as birth control.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it might just be a rumor that, like, some people somewhere say that if you make a tea with this, it might work. But the same people who say those things are the people who say things like, oh, if you have chest pain, all you gotta do, trust me on this, for the YouTube, for the disclaimer, do not trust me on this. This is not medical advice. Do not trust ancient medical advice. It is all incorrect. Don't do it.
Is it all incorrect, though? Surely they had to get...
Incorrect. It's all wrong. Just don't pay attention. Anyway, so this one thing on chest pain says, all you have to do is incinerate a yearling swallow.
Incinerate?
Incinerate it. Mix the ashes in a glass of water and chug them, and it'll fix your chest pain.
So drink bird ash.
Yes.
With or without the feathers?
They're also ash.
Also ash.
Yes. Just incinerate it and chug it. And
and
do not take this as medical advice.
That'll fix my back problems? I'm an American. I have American healthcare. I'll incinerate a bird.
Next episode, is Roman healthcare better than American healthcare?
We test on ourselves Roman healthcare methods. Oh God.
We're all in trouble.
We're in big trouble.
Oh no. Oh no.
Okay, here's a good question. When did the Byzantines become Byzantines? Well, that's a great question. Because the Byzantines were never Byzantines. Never ever at any point during their history were the Byzantines called Byzantines. Byzantium, the term Byzantium was invented, I think by, was it Stephen Runciman? I don't remember. It was coined by a historian, like, after the fact, in order to differentiate between the two terms. The Byzantines themselves refer to themselves as Romaioi, right, or Romanoi, or at the later...
Romanoi?
Yeah, Romanoi. Or at the later period of their history, they referred to themselves as Hellenes. Like, they started calling themselves Greek right around the time that Constantinople fell. They stopped calling themselves Romans and they started calling themselves Greeks, but they never called themselves Byzantines. That term is used exclusively by historians.
I think, yeah, I think, usually, generally speaking, you start seeing people talk about the Byzantines. 476 is, the easy term. I think a little bit before that, really you start seeing it now. So if you're gonna be very grumpy when I say this. I really start seeing the term Byzantine applied with Justinian. Is
The term
usually right around there.
Justinian is a pretty good marker. Constantine the First would also be a fair enough marker. Like, we call it Eastern Roman Empire, but the moment you start calling it the Eastern Roman Empire, you could call it the Byzantine Empire. Just because, like, any Byzantine historian's gonna... Oh. Well, if it matters, because my audio is being recorded natively on the computer, I didn't cut out for the audience. But what I was saying was Constantine would also be a reasonable marker to call them the Byzantines. Really, once you get the East-West split, I guess post-Theodosius. Theodosius was the last emperor to unite East and West. After that point, it's firmly Byzantine.
But you never hear about the Theodosian.
Istanbul or Constantinople. Istanbul. That would be what the city's called.
After 1453.
Yeah, after 1453, the name changed.
Yeah, after 1453, the city has been named Istanbul. Before that, it was named Constantinople, and before that, it was named Byzantium.
Actually, fun fact: I think it wasn't the name Istanbul wasn't formally adopted. I think until the 18th century. Before that, I think they had a different name, but I don't know what it was.
Yeah. Nick, I don't have a strong opinion on the answer, frankly. I use Eastern Roman Empire and Byzantine almost interchangeably, frankly, personally, until the age of Justinian, and then I just call it the Byzantine Empire because it's easy. But then again, I am a social and economic historian of the early Roman Empire, so like right around the year 0, and I say that with air quotes.
Yeah, Constantine. Yeah, you're right. Liquid's back. They did just call it the renaming from Constantinople to Constantine to Istanbul. I believe was part of. Was that Ataturk? Was that part of like the Turkish nationalist movement that it was renamed? I don't know. I would not be surprised if it was Ataturk though.
Yeah, I know there was a big there's a big kerfuffle, and I say kerfuffle as the biggest understatement of the century. There's a big kerfuffle, I think, with is it Macedonian nationalists or Greek nationalists who insist on calling the city Constantinople, and the Turks who are, like, no, it's been Istanbul for 500 years, guys, get it right. So, like, I don't want to get too engaged on that because that feels like it might have...
Oh, yeah, it's a great big nationalistic fight between Greece and Turkey.
And nationalistic fights are the stupidest.
Sure is.
it is a huge fight because, I mean, on the one hand, the Greeks do have a point. The Ottoman sultans did do a lot of like genocide, such as the Armenian genocide and the genocide of the Greeks on the Ionian coast. They got rid of a lot of ethnic groups within their empire in order to make it Turkish, which is something that should be discussed. Like, it happened; those people died, but now they're gone. And it is just Turks who live there. For the most part, I mean,
yeah, like the patriarch of Constantinople's been. I don't think he's in Constantinople anymore.
No, he's still there. I saw the patriarch when I went to Istanbul.
Okay, because I know that. I mean, there's always issues. There's always like, when's it gonna happen? I mean, just because I still.
You cut out entirely, Christina.
Oh, well, never mind.
But there is a great big fight. In fact, one of the questions that I have here, which is a question we get on a lot of our videos, is what if we had saved Constantinople? And that's a question that demonstrates a lack of historical knowledge. But I presume what it means is what if, Venice had actually shown up and stopped, Mehmed II from taking Constantinople in 1453.
Would it have mattered?
It wouldn't have. Really wouldn't have.
At that point, Constantinople was a city. It wasn't an empire.
It was barely a city. It was actually. It would be more accurate to term Constantinople at that point as 12 villages behind a wall.
Yeah.
Did the
But yeah, no.
Byzantines call their armies legions? No. So the Byzantines speak Greek, and the Greek word for an army is a taxis, or a syntaxis, or a tagma, right? Which basically just means something that's organized. So, for example, the tagmata were the Byzantine professional corps that existed in Constantinople. And, they used, like, stratue, stratupedon, strateos, right, strategos. They would have called their armies, like, strates, or whatever it is in Greek. They wouldn't have called them legions. They would have said it in Greek, whatever the Greek word for army is. The use of the word legion had fallen out of fashion completely at that point. Do you think if Pyrrhus had survived, he would have come to greater game than he did? I assume you mean.
Fame.
Fame. I mean, Pyrrhus's whole thing was that he wanted to be a new Alexander, and he just wanted to do it in the West instead of the East. And
but he got killed by a roof tile.
But he died. That's the thing. He died, and he lost a lot of fights. And honestly, Pyrrhus, he was a good tactician. I think he gets kind of overinflated, actually, for how good or how bad Pyrrhus is. But, he did die. He was a Greek civil rights icon. I would love to... I don't know if there was a civil rights movement for Greeks. I don't even know if Pyrrhus would have identified himself as Greek. He was Aetolian. He was from Epirus. He was, from, an area, south of Albania, essentially. More Illyrian than anything. The Aetolian Greeks had their own dialect. They definitely didn't consider themselves Hellenes, I don't think. But, yeah. Oh, man, guys, I'm exhausted.
Yeah, well, you know what? We've been going on about 2 hours, yeah?
Yeah, we have. About.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, I think I'm going to throw in the proverbial tower.
The
Tower.
Tower.
Yeah, okay.
Which tower? If you could throw a single tower.
If I could throw a single tower, it would be the Tower of... what's the big one? Babylon? Babel. Oh, God, sure. I'm so tired, you guys. I'd shove the Tower of Babel right up something, Christopher.
Anyway, that being said, it is about supper time for me, too. So, I think it would be a good time to wrap up the stream.
All right, in that case, we'll see you guys next time.
Toodles.
Well, you guys take care. Thank you so much for the stream. Also, for those who are listening / watching this, go check out the Patreon. There's merch there. We've got art downloads. We've got a Discord that you guys could just come hang out with.
Hey, and speaking of the Patreon, feel free to leave in the comments what you would like to see.
If you want to see something in the Patreon.
If there's something that you would like from our Patreon specifically, please tell us. We would love to give it to you.
Hypothetically, not necessarily.
Bye.
Bye.